great honor to introduce to you Senator from Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I just want to thank Emily, our organizer, who's out here. She did a good job. She gets me fired up, and the chairman, I want to thank him, and the future senator. I have a lot of love for firefighters, especially folks that are getting out there and every day willing to risk their lives for their neighbors. In my faith, there's no greater love than that, than somebody putting their life out there. So I want to thank you, and I look forward to seeing you as a guy who has my title, Senator. I look forward to seeing you.
Absolutely.
So what I'm going to do is just talk for a little bit and then answer as many questions as we can get through. And what I do want to do, it may seem interesting to you, is I don't want to talk a lot about policy right now. What I really want to do is talk about our values and why I'm running and who I think we are. Because I've had a chance to lead at a lot of levels, from a city council person to lead my state's largest city. And the policy was really important, but what helped us create this radical transformation in Newark's destiny, a city that for 60 years was known for crime and corruption and was declining in population. What helped us to change it wasn't just that we had smart policy ideas. I'm proud of a lot of the innovative things we did, but what really changed it was the spirit that we brought out. The ability for us to rally around common values and common aspirations. And right now, I have to say, I'm running for president for the same reason I got involved in politics in Newark, New Jersey, which is this understanding of who we are as a people. We are right now at a moral moment in our nation where we're seeing folks from the highest offices in the land try to divide us against each other. We see ourselves slipping into more tribalism, us versus them, zero-sum game politics, fear-based politics. I literally in Washington hear often more animus directed towards other Americans than I do towards the Russians, who really right now are trying to undermine our democracy. We are in a crisis, and many people are beginning to believe that the forces tearing us apart are stronger than the forces holding us together. Well, I'm running for president because I don't believe that. I know who we are. I know that our history speaks to every generation working to put more indivisible into this one nation under God. I am literally here today because of small groups of Americans like this that on their own time, on their weekends, understood the mandates of patriotism. Patriotism is love of country. And you cannot love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen and women. And now love is not a sentiment, it's not a feel-good thing. Love is service, love is sacrifice. Love is saying that, hey, if your kids don't have a great public education to go for their genius, then my kids are lesser off. Love is understanding that we have common cause and common purpose and a singular destiny. And when I say I'm literally here, I'm not exaggerating. It was 50 years ago this summer that my parents were trying to move up from the South to New Jersey. And when they were going around looking at homes in 1969, every time they'd show up in homes in northern New Jersey with the best public schools, the real estate agent would see it's a black family and say, oh, I'm so sorry, this house is sold, or this house has been pulled off the market. And my parents were frustrated and angry and dejected. And what did they find? They found a bunch of Americans that used to meet in the living room, mostly white folks, but a diverse audience, who just said, this is about who we are. We're not going to surrender to circumstances trying to divide our nation. We're one community. And there were people from different faiths, Christian and Jewish, who said, our faith mandates that we welcome the stranger. And they set up a sting operation. I call it like a conspiracy of love. What they did is they said, okay, you guys go look at a house, and if you're told it's sold, we're going to send a volunteer white couple right behind you. And they did that. My parents were told the house I grew up in, and I'm really proud that one of my neighbors, one of my childhood friends, who now lives the last 10, 15 years in Omaha, he's here. So literally, in the house I grew up in, and my parents were told it was sold, they leave, and the white couple came and found out the house was still for sale. And then they pretended they loved the house. This is a beautiful home. Look at this bathroom. Look at the grout work here. It's amazing. And they pretended like they loved the home, and they put a bid on the house, and the bid was accepted, and papers were drawn up, and the closing was set in the real estate agent's office. And on the day of the closing, guess what? The white couple did not show up. My father did, and a volunteer lawyer. And they walk in to confront the real estate agent, who now is so shocked and upset that he got caught in this sting and this conspiracy of love, but he had no love. He literally stands up, no exaggeration, stands up and punches my dad's lawyer in the face. And then he sticks a dog on my dad. And now let me tell you, every time my dad would tell this story as I was growing up, the dog would get bigger. Eventually he'd be like, boy, I had to fight a pack of wolves to get you in this house. So I grew up around a kitchen table, two black parents who told, not in any way candy-coating the difficulties that they faced in their lives. The bigotry, the hatred, the often the dark corners of our country, but what they celebrated around that kitchen table was the goodness of Americans, who in times of moral crisis didn't fall into the divisions that demagogues were trying to separate, but united as a nation, understanding that your family and my family have common cause and common purpose. That's where we are right now. We see other countries blowing past us on things that matter because we can't even come together and do the things we know we should do. China just built 18,000 miles of high-speed rail. And we can't even invest in our own infrastructure to stop the flooding, or hell, the busiest rail corridor in North America actually runs from Boston to Washington, D.C. It runs half an hour slower than it did in the 1960s. We used to be the best educators on the planet Earth. Everyone knew that. Now here in Iowa, public schools are under attack. Teachers are under attack. Other countries are doubling down not only in their investment from K to 12, but they're making college more affordable. For us, in my lifetime, it's gone up 3 times, 300% the cost of college. And guess what other countries do, which is radical, y'all? They believe in science in other countries. and they actually know that the brain, the most valuable economic unit on the planet, is the genius of our children. And they know the brain develops most from the 2nd, 3rd trimester to the 3rd, 4th year. So guess what they do? They have universal prenatal care. We don't. We leave the developed world in infant mortality, in maternal mortality, because folks aren't getting the support they need. They have universal preschool. We don't. I can show you the data that shows $1 invested in preschool produces multiples of that in return for the growth of our economy. They have universal the child care, affordable child care. They have paid family leave. We don't. Afghanistan and the Congo have paid family leave, and we don't. Now, this isn't partisan stuff I'm talking about. Infrastructure, education. These aren't partisan issues. They're what our parents and grandparents knew we needed to do. We used to have American majorities, Eisenhower Highway Act, expanding public education that was the envy of the planet. We used to do the things we knew that worked. And we knew by investing in each other, Medicare, Social Security, investing in the security and the strength of everyone helped this nation thrive. Now the policies we're purveying are not doing those things, allowing injustice to thrive, pitting literally people against each other. This taxes of the Trump tax cut that we all battled over was all about pitting corporations and their lobbyists against you. And the corporations that are lobbyists won and got the biggest tax cut. Literally, corporate profits already at an 80-year high. Now they're going bigger, while wages for the average American are stagnant. And the things we knew worked, union jobs. I am the grandson of a UAW worker, which the UAW got my family out of poverty. We used to say that if you worked a full-time job in America, you could make it. The minimum wage back in my dad's era was above the poverty line. Now I live, the only senator that lives in a low-income, below-the-poverty line community. I see my neighbors working longer hours than my parents and still need food stamps at the local bodega to feed their families as we strip the dignity from work. I want to talk about policy, but you understand what I'm getting at. This has to do with the values. It has to do with who we are. And I'm telling you right now, this election is not just a referendum on one guy in one office. It is a referendum on who we are and who we're going to be to each other. And let me talk for a second, because I'm a little bit disturbed right now that when we poll Democrats, they say the number one thing we want, and I understand why people say that, we're a bit traumatized. People say the number one thing we want is just, God, I want a candidate who just can beat Donald Trump. Now, I understand that sentiment. We got to beat the guy. But let me just say right now, I kind of have bigger aspirations than just beating one guy. Beating Donald Trump is the floor. It is not the ceiling. It gets us out of the valley. And so I want to tell you how we're going to do it. We're not going to beat Donald Trump by always talking about what we're against. We got to be a party that talks about what we are for. Yeah. I am running because I know a lot of my colleagues who are running. Heck, the 2020 election doesn't stand for the year now. It stands for the number of people running, 2020. And I love a lot of my colleagues, but I'm running because I know that I can inspire us, activate us to get our base voters out, to reach out to people that have been discouraged by our party because of decisions we've made before, from our trade deals to mass incarceration. I know that I can speak to the broadness of our nation and inspire us about what we are for. I'm not running for the simple need to beat Republicans. We got to watch that. We've got to run a race to unite Americans in new American majorities. The kind that we had 50 years ago that helped us go to the moon. An American majority. And I believe in our generation, we can defy gravity once again. But we got to be careful not to approach this election using the tactics of that who we're trying to oppose. Come on now. I was running into an Iowa town hall, and this big guy comes up to me. Now, he sees me. I'm a big guy, former Stanford tight end and All-American football player, and the older I get, the better I was. And he puts his arm around me and says, dude, I'm like, yeah. He goes, I want you to punch Donald Trump in the face. And I look at him and I go, dude, that's a felony, man. Come on now. We are not going to beat Donald Trump by fighting him using his tactics, on his terms, on his turf. We aren't going to beat him by showing the worst of who we are. We got to beat him by showing the best of who we are. Because every generation of Americans, my parents taught me this, every generation of Americans, the gardens of our democracy have never been free of the weeds of hatred and bigotry and divisiveness. The question is in those moral moments of the past, how do we respond? Come on, you know this president right now, he uses the same language as another party that rose up solely on anti-immigration. They were called the Know-Nothings, and they were against Irish and German immigrants then. Same language. He uses the same language as Governor George Wallace. I'm not joking. Governor George Wallace accused activists of being communists. Our president literally does that. This is one of those moments where we have to realize we have seen this before, but what defined us in those past generations was that in those moral moments, we didn't take on the tactics of demagoguery, the tactics of divisiveness. We didn't beat Bull Connor because we brought bigger fire hoses and bigger dogs in Birmingham. We beat him because those artists of activism, they inspired a nation. They called us together, black and white. They called us to a common cause. They expanded the moral imagination of this country about who we were. They called to the conscience of our country. This is one of those moments. And we need leaders, not leaders that are really going to rise to this occasion. I'm running because I know what we can achieve. I've seen it. I've stood up to bullies and demagogues, and I beat them. That's how you rise in a tough city like Newark, New Jersey. I've gone to the United States Senate and brought people together across party lines to get major bills done, like opportunity zones or actually criminal justice reform. And my purpose in running is knowing that I can beat Donald Trump, but more importantly than that, I can do it in a way that unites this country, that does what we need right now, which is to have a revival of civic grace, a more courageous empathy for one another, for understanding that just like in my mom and dad's age, what saved this country was that conspiracy of wealth. So let me end with this, because the story I told you is actually not complete about my family moving into my neighborhood. And I want to tell you the end of the story because I didn't know until I became a United States Senator. I literally got down to the Senate and I decided to do what a lot of senators do who have a high sense of self-regard. I decided to write a book. And if your name is Booker, it's a lot of pressure when you write a book. You have expectations. And so I decided to go back and fact check my dad. I mean, how big was the dog, for crying out loud? And so I called around to find the people from the Fair Housing Council who used to be in New Jersey, and I found the head of the Fair Housing Council from the 1960s. She was easy to find, because at 92 years old, she is still the head of the Fair Housing Council in New Jersey. And this amazing woman of grace and spirit, she now doesn't represent black families. A lot of black folks live where I grew up. She actually now represents same-sex couples, Americans with disabilities, Muslim families, because to her, justice has no color, no orientation. Justice is there's one justice, one nation, one love, she believes. And she confirms a lot of the facts. Guys, it was not a pack of wolves that my dad fought. And she actually sends me to the lawyer who organized everything, and that's what I want to end with. This conversation shook me, affirmed my core values, affirmed the urgency of why I got involved in politics in 1998 and why I'm running for president now. I call this guy, he's 84 years old, a retired judge in New Jersey, and I ask him all the facts, he confirms it, and then one question popped up that after he told me what was going on in his life at that time, he was struggling, just starting a business, a young guy trying to support a young family, and it just suddenly occurred to me, why? Sir, why would you spend so much time representing black families moving into your neighborhood at a time of fears of white flight, fears of real estate prices going on, where you actually could get the scorn of your neighbors for doing what you did? Why would you do it? And he goes, well, I remember the very moment I made the decision. And I go, the moment? He goes, yeah, it was March 7th, 1965. And I was like, whoa, you knew the date. And I study history, but the date didn't ring a bell to me. And okay, well, what was going on? And he said, well, I was sitting down watching TV. Now, this was back when we had 3 channels. Don't fake it, because some of you are too young to remember this. And they would go off at like 11 o'clock at night and be done. I said this to a high school in Nevada, and one of the teenagers raised their hands and looked so distressed. I'm like, yes? She's like, what did you guys do? And I'm like, look, they found things to do at night. That's probably why we had higher birth rates back then. And he's sitting there on his couch after a long week watching TV, and they were watching a movie. I looked it up. Most of America who was watching TV was watching a movie called Judgment at Nuremberg. And then something happened on this historic day. They broke away from an ongoing movie, breaking news. I know we have it every 5 minutes now on our stations. It's like Melania has a jacket, breaking news. But this was very rare. They broke away from an ongoing TV movie to show a bridge in Alabama called the Edmund Pettus Bridge. He's going, this day, this historic day, 1965, a bunch of marchers had left Selma and were trying to get to Montgomery to protest voting rights. And they get stopped on the bridge by Alabama state troopers who would not let them pass. And then what he saw next horrified him is what we call Bloody Sunday. They shot tear gas at these marchers and then stormed in with their billy clubs and just started viciously beating them. One of those marchers who's always been my hero is now my colleague named John Lewis. And he says to me, he's such a humble man, so regal but humble. And he says to me, Cory, I shed a little bit of blood on that bridge. And I'm like, John, honestly, you had your head cracked open. You were not going to kind of be carried back to the church for safety. And so what does a white man on a couch 1,000 miles away who's watching this on TV do? Does he just sit there in a moral moment and say somebody should do something? No. Does he allow? We all do sometimes. It's our inability to do everything to undermine our determination to just do something in the cause of our country. He doesn't allow that to happen. He stands up and he tells me, he starts racking his brain because he knows he can't afford a plane ticket to Alabama. He can't even afford to close his business one day, and he's racking his brain, does some calculations, says, you know what, I could do a little more. I can spare an hour a week of pro bono work. And he says he calls around to see who might need some help. And he finds this woman, now 92, but about 50 years ago, a young woman who just was desperate for some help. And she's like, hallelujah, I do need some legal help. And he says 65 turned to 66, they're working together, turns to 67. He says he organizes other lawyers. 68, he goes, the conspiracy of love, it was going really well. 69, and then he says, I'll never forget the day I get this case file from Miss Lee Porter, the head of the organization. And the case file is about this family trying to move into the community and they're frustrated and they're getting rejected house after house. And he goes, Cory, do you know the name on that case file? I go, no, sir. He goes, well, the two names on that case file were Cory and Carolyn Booker, your parents. I am literally standing before you right now as a United States Senator, as a candidate for the highest office in the land, President of the United States. I am here because of us, because of ordinary Americans who in times of moral crisis did extraordinary things for the cause of our country. They didn't divide this nation. They didn't pit us against each other. They understood that we are one nation under God with one destiny, that the very founding document, the Declaration of Independence, ends with this Declaration of Interdependence. It says, hey, if we're going to make it as a nation, we must mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. This is that moral moment. Every generation has it. This is that moral moment. Every generation, demagogues try to rise, try to pervert the culture of this country. But now the question is what will we do? This election is not a small election about one person, one office. It is a big election about the culture and the values and the principles of America. It is being eroded now, not just here in our country, but other nations are losing faith in our lights and our love. We now, at this time, are called as a country to rise up again, to see within our brothers and sisters common cause and common purpose, because we have too much common pain. It's a time when the planet needs us, where there's famines and refugee crises, and a planet is in peril with crisis change, the climate change. We need America now. And if I have my way, this will be an inspiring election. It will be a movement election where we don't just win the highest office in the land, but we win back the spirit of our nation, that we rekindle the flame, the torch of America, and that we become, as I believe we're called to be, a light unto all nations. We will not decline this country. We will rise. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's have a conversation now. I know I'm looking at my team who's going to try to keep the clock. I want to try to get through as many questions as possible about any issues that you all care about, any policy issues, or challenge me on. I've gotten some tough questions now, like, Cory, could you please calculate how much money you save on hair products every year? Tough question. I'm ready for anything. And I know you all are not shy. And please do not ask any questions of Brian Magaro over here. He has too many childhood stories that can tank my presidency. Yes, please. And say your name. Let's create community so people know who we are.
So what can you do as a senator with what McConnell's done to block us from moving forward to making us safer?
So I'm grateful that you're asking this question, and I want to say that this, in the Senate, is not a partisan issue. We actually have bipartisan bills to deal with this. But you're right, Mitch McConnell will not put on the floor. And that to me, as Chuck Schumer said just yesterday, this is a patriotic moment. Like, what are you going to do when the Russians are attacking? And by the way, as a guy who serves on the Foreign Relations Committee, they've done this playbook before. On Lithuania and Estonia, they've been doing this for years to other countries and really attacking their democracies. And so we have to act. And so as a senator, I'm calling for it, I'm pushing for it. I've been able to get things to the floor despite Mitch McConnell's early objections before. We're going to try to use every tactic. But I want to keep pushing back on everybody here. And I want to warn you, I'm sure you're not going to hear this from any other presidential candidate, but I'm not going to put a warning label on my candidacy. If you elect me to be your president, I'm going to ask more from you than any president probably has in decades. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm not going to ask you to pay more taxes. Heck, I want to give 150 million Americans a tax break, and I can show you how we'll pay for it. But what I'm going to ask for you is to get more involved, to be more demanding, to do more acts of service. Not that everybody here isn't doing it already, but if you don't like the country as it is, then what we're doing now isn't enough. And the reason why I say this question is that I'm going to fight like a Dickens. Anybody who sees me standing up against Jeff Sessions or in the Kavanaugh hearings knows I'm a fighter, but I also know how change is made. Change does not come from Washington, it comes to Washington. We didn't get the women's right to vote because a bunch of male senators in the early 1900s got together on the floor and said, okay guys, all right, ready, we're gonna do women's right vote, ready, great. No, that didn't happen. It wasn't a strong Thurman who came to the Senate floor one day and said, I've seen the light, you know, people some civil rights. All of the change has to be people demanding it. And so what I ask from everybody here is, I promise you, I will be fighting on this issue, not because I'm a Democrat, but because I'm an American. But everybody here who believes that this threat is real, remember, take an action, even if it's small, because our collective acts of goodness add up to a tsunami often of change. And I hope you'll help me make this change. Yes, sir. And say your name again.
Paul Flower. Can you just talk a little bit about how you can use what you did with bipartisanship with criminal justice reform and transfer that into other things that you're trying to do? Because I've always really been impressed with how you did that.
Yeah, so understand that I'm a fighter when it comes to Democratic politics. I've been to this state many times, not just because my grandmother was born and raised in Des Moines, but I've been to this state to campaign for a lot of other people over the years. And I will do everything I can to get new majorities in the Democratic Party, and I know we're going to get them. If I'm the leader of this party, I know that states like Iowa or Texas or Georgia are actually blue states if we actually invest in parties. I was shocked in the 2018 election, as your party chairman would note, that I was the #1 fundraiser for state legislative candidates. And the reason why I was shocked is I'm like, wait a minute, where are all the other people around the country who should understand that even if we elect a new president, the way in this state they're attacking a woman's right to choose, the way in this state they're attacking teachers' rights to organize, the way in this state that they're changing Medicaid and doing things that are really, we can change the presidency, but if we don't change this state, we're not going to get things to change. And so the first part of your question I want you to understand is, we have to fight to make sure the Democratic Party is strong. We have a 50-state strategy, invest in community strength and community local party leaders like your chairman here. But the point is, I'm not in it just to be a great leader of the Democratic Party. I believe in this country we need to create new American majorities that have nothing to do with partisanship, that can get the big things done, like immigration reform, which we know there's a bipartisan pathway to get that done because in the Senate in 2013, months before I got there, they actually passed a bipartisan bill that suddenly tanked because of the demagoguery of some of the right wing of the Republican Party that made that bill impossible. Even two people who were involved in that deal turned their back on the deal. And so I want to tell you, you asked me a direct question, how do you, Cory, deal with bipartisanship? And my goals of always doing that, as a guy who worked with a Republican governor to transform a city, got criminal justice reform done and other things, is you've got to do the work of building a bipartisan coalition. And what that means is not demonizing other people. I can't tell you, Chris Christie was my governor, lost over 10 points in New Hampshire for the sin. They ran a commercial against him for the sin of hugging Barack Obama. I'm not joking. It was after Hurricane Sandy, and they had a hug, and I'm a hugger. It wasn't even that great of a hug, folks. I was attacked by my own party. I'm not exaggerating. When John McCain came onto the Senate floor after his terminal cancer diagnosis, I went over across the aisle and gave him a Booker Bear hug. By the time I got home, I was being torched on Twitter for hugging somebody that some people call me a baby killer and all these other things. I'm going to be a fierce, majority-building Democratic president that gets us back to Senate and more, but I'm also going to be someone that affirms the dignity and humanity of all Americans, that does the work like I do right now. I go to Bible study in a Republican chairman's office who I've now passed things with. I took Ted Cruz out to dinner. Yeah, I know that could get me in trouble in the Democratic audience, but I said, you know what? Brene Brown says you can't hate up close, so pull people in. And it was tough. Ted and I had to first decide where we were going to go to dinner. I'm a vegan. In Texas, I think they might, not look kindly on my type. But the truth of the matter is, he and I passed legislation together. And so I'm going to be looking to talk to this country because I know we agree on things. We agree on common sense gun safety. In fact, 84% of gun owners agree with lots of other things I'm pushing. We agree on immigration reform. There's not a Democrat here that does not want secure borders. Not a Democrat here that doesn't know we have to respect borders, but we also believe that we can respect human values. And by the way, Republicans don't want to see children in cages, at least not most Republicans. Obviously, our president thought that was a good strategy. And so I'm going to be a president that not only works to build great majorities, but I'm going to tell you, if you want somebody that's going to campaign a different way or govern in a different way, I know there's a lot of folks out there that might want to, meet fire with fire, beat fire with fire. I ran a fire department, not a good strategy. But I am running to try to unite this country, and I will get big bipartisan things done. And the way you can be confident of that is because I've done it already. Other questions? Yes?
I have, Danielle Cutel, I have one. How do we, it's like, when the country seems so divisive, how do we keep our spirits up? How is it's like it can be so draining.
Yes.
You hear Trump say, like, send them back or whatever.
Yes.
It's like, how do you, when there's so much racism that's being spotlighted, how do you keep from being so, like, downhearted and just keep your spirits up and just, we as a party and, like, in a country, how do we just go on and say, this is nuts?
I am so grateful for that question because it is a internal conversation I have with myself a lot. Not only because I see the things I never imagined hearing from a president of the United States passing through their lips, never imagined. Not only is that hurtful and I see it, it actually gives license and liberty to hate mongers. They use his words on in everything from, I'm not exaggerating, everything from white supremacists, terroristic folks, they're starting to use the language of this president to justify their actions. And so this is such a great question because I know everybody has felt that heartbreak. And I want to tell you right now, if America hasn't broken your heart, you probably don't love her enough. Because there's a lot of heartbreaking things going on, folks. I had a young man that I watched grow up killed with an assault rifle at the top of my block that I lived in just last year. And so I want to get to this question because there's no easy answer. But I learned the best thing about this. I learned it from a woman. Some of you know I left Yale Law School, moved to the Central Ward of New Jersey. Then for almost a decade, about 8 years, I moved into some high-rise projects, tough housing. And the lobby of the building I moved into, in that lobby, the tenant president of these buildings, her son was murdered. And then I'm stunned that she never left. Now, she and I had the resources. We could have lived in a lot of places, but she chose to live in the community where her son was murdered. The wretchedness of that, the pain, I can never imagine. When I asked her why she still lives there, she looks at me almost indignant about the question. She goes, why do I still live here? I go, yes, Ms. Jones. She goes, because I'm in charge of Homeland Security. She taught me that hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word. That's who we are at our best. When President Trump first did a Muslim ban, think of all the things a new president could unite this country around, infrastructure, he decides to pick things like tearing healthcare away from people and Muslim bans. I ran out to Dulles Airport to try to represent some of the Muslim families who were being detained and get them lawyers, but I walk in and I see the whole concourse full of hundreds and hundreds of Americans of all backgrounds chanting and singing and cheering Muslims, when not even American citizens. They were cheering, they were showing us our values of our country. I literally got teary-eyed seeing my nation. I went back to the Senate floor, and then Senator Joe Donnelly, I told him about what happened, and he's like, Cory, same thing happened to me. I went to Indianapolis Airport, and there were tons of Americans just talking about who we were, cheering people when they came off the planes, except for Cory. There were no international flights. There was just a bunch of people hugging those coming in from Detroit. On one of my worst days ever, I had hope on the inauguration. I'm standing behind a new president. I'm hoping we're going to hear, like other great inaugural speeches, malice towards none, charity towards all, but we heard a whole lot of malice. It was a painful speech. It was such a painful speech that this is reported, and it's a presidential quote, so forgive me for the foul language, but it's reported that as George Bush and Bill Clinton were walking out next to each other, George Bush turned to Bill Clinton and said about the speech, he goes, "That was some strange shit." I went home that night, really now going through my mind, trying to figure out how I was going to block their attempts to take away Obamacare. I'm doing the numbers. I'm thinking about tactics, and I had a pounding headache knowing what was going to come. But the next morning, as I'm curled up in bed, the reports start coming in. My phone starts ringing off the hook. They're like, Cory, get up. Because there are hundreds of thousands of women around the country that are saying, Cory, this is not a time to curl up, to shut up or give up. We are not going to let despair have the last word. This is the time to rise up, to stand up, and to speak up. That's who we are as a country. And in this moment, you have a choice to freeze or fight. You have a choice to run away or run towards? We run towards the big problems. I've done it all my life. And we're going to run towards this 2020 election and render Donald Trump to the ash heaps of history where we put all the demagogues who try to divide this country as we unite again for justice. We're going to go with the notorious RBP shirt, definitely gets questioned. And then we're going to go with the gentleman right here. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Jason from Omaha. Two-part question about voting. First part of it would be, you're so inspirational. There's just no doubt about that. And I wish I could get every non-voter in here just to spend 30 minutes with you. My question about voting first would be, how would you recommend folks like us talk to people who say the worst things possible, such as, my vote doesn't matter, I don't care? It's a punch in the stomach for me to hear that, to see someone so just actively engaged in the voting process. And the second part would be, would you be for legislation or proposals to reform voting? For example, simple things like moving a voting day to Saturdays instead of the Tuesday that it's always landed on, which is, you know, past history stuff. What do you think about that?
So I put out a big voting plan of common sense things we can do, make voting a national holiday, automatic voter registration. So I hope you'll check out my plan to just create a better voting process, which is reflective of what the House of Representatives did. Their very first bill, H.R. 1, was all about reforming the voting process and stopping the things that folks are doing to suppress the vote. And so one of the things I tell people all the time who tell me that their vote doesn't matter or they're discouraged about the whole system, I said, okay, I can literally quote to you from the intelligence reports of what the Russians are trying to do online to dissuade Americans from voting. Literally saying your vote doesn't matter or none of these candidates are worthy to vote for. They're trying to divide us and suppress the vote. That's how they win, because a democracy, for its vitality, needs participation. And the second thing I often tell people who kind of like me, I say, hey, I would not be here. I won my first election by a couple dozen votes. I mean, there was thousands of people voted, but I won by, it was that razor's thin. And so I don't know how that's one of the biggest things that we have to combat is cynicism and inaction. King said it more eloquently than I can. He said, the problem today, what we have to repent for is not just the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people, it's the appalling silence and inaction of the good people. And I know that Democrats would win, heck, just about every election in this country. I'm not exaggerating. I'm talking, we would win states back, congressional districts back, if we could just engage and mobilize people to vote. And so when I'm the leader of the party, I'm going to bring 21st century technologies into getting this done. And I'll just give you one example that I tell all the time. You know, I go to one of the larger churches in my city and in my state, and my pastor, who never tells you who to vote for, even though when I'm running, he tends to have me stand up in church, says, I'm not telling you who to vote for, but that's one handsome looking man right there. But the best he can do right now is say, hey, stole some polos at buses. But I've looked at the social science. One of the biggest things that moves people to vote, you know what it is? I hate to tell you, because my parents used it on me when I was growing up, it's just shame and guilt. If people know whether you're going to vote or not, they have to vote. So I can give every pastor in this country, because of technology, voting records are open databases. Every pastor can have a list of his people on his app, a list of his church membership, and actually the voting records of the people on his church. And he can literally send out text messages. You did not vote in the last school board election, and voting is a value of this church, activism and engagement. So I just have been thinking about this a long time, and I think the biggest challenge we have as a Democratic Party is participation. We win elections when there's high voter turnouts, period. Republicans and Democrats. On surge voter turnouts, we do well. The reason why we often get shellacked in the midterms is because Democratic voter participation tends to go down. I remember the 2014 election. Our voter participation went down dramatically, Republicans just a little bit. So this is a problem we have to solve. All of us have to take responsibility for doing it. So you've got to get better on your pitch to cynical people. But if I'm the leader of the party, I promise you, I'm going to make a mission of my life to drive voter participation in this country up. Yes, sir.
Senator Booker, thanks for coming today.
Thank you. What's your name, sir?
My name is Matt.
All right.
And I'm from Omaha.
All right.
And a couple weeks ago...
With a name like Matt, I wonder if all your life people have been walking all over you.
Only when they ask you to run
I'm sorry, that was a terrible dad joke. I have to get one in per town hall. But go ahead.
Well, a couple weeks ago, a journalist named Andy No was beaten in the streets of Portland by a group called Antifa. And he was sent to the hospital with a brain hemorrhage for the crime of doing what I'm doing today, which is showing up with a camera and taking pictures. Now, I don't think anybody in the Democrat Party is responsible for that, but a lot of these people who are beating this guy with concrete milkshakes think that they're on your side. So in the spirit of bipartisan unity and love, will you unequivocally, and without reservation condemn Antifa for what happened there?
I will, first of all, I don't know the circumstances, so you have to educate me on how my team look at it, but I unequivocally condemn violence. Unequivocally condemn that, wherever it's coming from. And I think that that's important. And folks who, whatever the violent action, and there's no, I don't want to create false equivalencies. We have a crisis in our country right now where people are turning more and more towards violence. And I'm going to get in trouble for saying this maybe because I think college campuses that turn away conservative speakers make a mistake. That I think that they should come. Why would my country create, my college create an environment where I don't have to engage with people that have dramatically different views than me? It actually makes me sharper of mind, body and spirit. And so I worry about sometimes our side of the aisle that does things that to me don't seem to be open to discourse and dialogue, and especially I condemn any actions of anybody on violence. But I do want to say this, that we create often a false equivalency. The violent actions right now, and I just came from a hearing with the head of the FBI where I said this to him, the majority of our terrorist attacks, the majority of them since 9/11, have been domestic groups, right-wing extremist groups, and the majority of those have been white supremacist groups. And so what's happening on the right now is manifested in so much of the violence we're seeing, attacks on churches, attacks on synagogues. We're seeing things that are really a crisis. So if I'm president of the United States, I'm taking this seriously. I'm going to recognize that the bigotry and the hate coming from right-wing groups is something that we should have a much better system of engaging, understanding why often young people are susceptible to this, and doing something about it. Because as much as we seem to focus tremendous amounts of our financial resources on terrorists, or right now moving billions of dollars to protect ourselves on the borders, I say that in quotes because this president wants to spend billions of dollars building an ancient wall on our borders at the time that we have zones and sensors and drones and much more things we could be doing. It's a waste of dollars as opposed to investing in what keeps us safe. But if you're worried about being safe in America, let's talk about threats that do not get the resources, like gun violence. We've had more Americans die in the last 50 years from gun violence than every single war in American history combined, from the Revolutionary War to our current wars. And yet the one agency that's in charge of investigating this, the ATF, has been literally starved. Well, not literally, they're eating well, but they've been made anemic as an agency that can't even investigate and enforce the laws that we have. And so my point is, we need to start focusing on what the real threats to our community are. Why don't we talk about environmental injustice? Every single state now has Superfund sites. Those are these highly toxic sites that we used to have a bipartisan commitment to doing something about. Reagan reauthorized a small tax on the most polluting companies to clean these up, and they started going down. But guess what happened in the era of no taxes or all taxes are bad? They wouldn't reauthorize that tax in today's Congress, and guess what's happened to Superfund sites? The number of them are going up. But now we have something, I know this is a radical concept again, something called science. We have longitudinal data about what happens to children born around Superfund sites. You have them in Iowa. Well, children born around them, and I know correlation isn't causation, but children born around Superfund sites have 20% higher rates of autism and birth defects. And so I'm just this guy that says, if I'm the leader of this nation, the number one job I have is to keep my country safe. And we need to start focusing on everything from environmental injustice to gun violence, to the things that are really threatening our nation. And white supremacy, the violence around white supremacy, is something we need to be doing as well. All right. One more question. The problem is, I've got two women in front of me. Come on, Tom. Can I do the two women here?
I see where you're going with this.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to do the speed round. Okay, I'm going to do the speed round. Okay, say your name first for everybody.
I'm Dixie Trevi. In order to make people know that their vote really does count, are you willing to have us do away with it?
Electoral college. I feel very strongly about this issue that votes should count equally in American democracy, And the person with the most votes should actually win the election, not let him see. And a lot of people say, well, it's a good thing people go out and campaign in California and New York. I'm like, are you kidding me? Right now, we already have people only campaigning in a few of those so-called battleground states. If we lift the Electoral College, we're going to have people going to all over this country trying to earn votes in many different areas. I would not want to lose the Midwest. I would be here campaigning. And you'll see a lot more diversity of attempt, a lot more voters getting attention. Right now, if you live in California, people think nobody campaigns here because they know this is automatically going to be a blue column. Well, that would change if one vote counted as one vote. People would be trying to go out and fight for lots of different areas. So I agree with you, but I do want to say this. That is a hard lift. It is literally having to change our Constitution. And I just want to be honest with you and very candid. If I am your new president, it is not high on my list. The kind of things I'm going to be working on right now is to massively expand access to healthcare when I get in, massive investments in infrastructure, everything from high-speed broadband and Wi-Fi here in the state to dealing with the climate change challenges. There's a lot of things that will be on my priority list before that because it will take a massive constitutional change. All right, yes?
Speak to us of school vouchers versus public education, the balancing of the dollars, and
I'll do it on one condition, if you tell me your name.
oh, sorry, Lori Bliss.
Okay. Lori, I am so grateful for you asking this question because there's a lot of mess out there about my history and my work. And so let everybody understand that as a guy who's gotten endorsed by the state's teachers union twice, as a guy who has stood up for public education and my vision, which I'll talk about in a second, for public education in our country, that's where I'm really excited. But I do want to talk about a little bit of my history. Is I was the mayor of a city that had its whole school system taken over by the state, the Republican governor, and my kids were failing. And I lived, as I told you, in these projects where I had parents with the anguish of not having schools that serve their kids. And so we went to work on transforming our Newark school system. And we did not, we weren't discriminating against the types of schools. We had charters in our city, we had district schools in our city, we had magnet schools in our city. And I just simply had this one belief, is if I'm going to change the city, I'm going to make sure we just have great schools for every single child. And so we took our most successful schools and expanded them. Some of them were charter schools. We took our low-performing schools and closed them. Some of these were charter schools that should have closed and should have probably never been opened in the first place. And we created a network of high-performing schools that actually now, I don't like this idea that some charters could cream the better students. So we said, none of that. We're going to create a one enrollment system in the inner city of Newark, New Jersey. And what does that accomplish? We are now the #1 school system in all of America for beat the odds schools, high poverty to high performance. Our graduation rates for all of our kids have gone up over 30%. And in the city that's majority African Americans who tended to go to the worst schools, if you're an African American kid in my city, your chances of going to a school that beats the wealthier suburbs went up almost 400%. But to me, this debate we're having often about charters in our city, in our nation, I tell people charters are just 3% of our nation's schools, and they don't work everywhere. I fought against charters opening in some areas of my state. I look at states like yours, and your Republican legislatures are trying to pass privatization schemes in public education that I think are dangerous and very much could lead to more segregation in our school systems. And so as your president, I'm going to be very focused on public education. And the first thing we did in Newark is the first thing I'm going to do as President of the United States, which is to raise teacher salary. Because what we're doing is one of the most important professions to our economy, because you can't have any other professions without teachers. We are now driving down salaries. We have teachers, and some of you all know teachers like this. They don't know how they're going to pay their loans off, but yet they reach into their pockets still to pay for things that their kids need. So as teacher, I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to raise salaries. How? I'm going to change a different tax bracket for teachers. Hedge fund workers right now pay less of their percentage of their salary to taxes than teachers do. That's outrageous. We should raise teacher salary by effectively making, I don't want to just say teachers, I want to say school professionals, because we have psychologists in our schools, counselors in our schools, and more. And we give them special tax status. Number two is we make sure that we forgive their debt. If you're willing to be in public schools, you should not be crushed by this debt. So those are two things I'm going to be doing. But the last thing I want to tell you that I'm doing in education, which is really important to me as a guy who got into the weeds of education, is to fully fund special education at the federal level. And that will drive so much money. So you are so persistent. I said those are the two last questions, but just because you're wearing a Council Bluffs t-shirt with a mighty squirrel. The mighty black squirrels. I mean, they are tenacious animals, for crying out loud. It's intimidating. Yes. I mean, my school mascot at Stanford was the tree, and we are intimidated by squirrels. So I bow my head to the mighty black squirrels.
Okay, my question is, I'm a retired teacher, 44 years.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I can't believe you started teaching at 5 years old, so sorry, that was a naked pander. It's terrible. But go ahead. What's your question?
The Medicare for all the candidates have been talking about it, whether they're for it, against it, whatever, but they talk about everybody from 18 to 64. Well, I've been there, done that. Nobody has said what's going to happen to my Social Security check when you all, whoever, God willing, gets elected, gets to change that. Okay, do my checks stop coming and then everything else goes on? Nobody has said, seniors, don't worry, because yours is still coming.
So let me do this. Seniors, don't worry. I will say this for a number of reasons. My great aunt, Des Moines, died last week at 100 years old. And it hurts to lose her, especially right now during the presidential campaign, but what an amazing life, a century she lived and loved in this state. And I've seen lots of seniors in a system as it is right now not be afforded the dignity that they deserve, that the years have come. And this is across the board. I see veteran seniors who don't get the resources they deserve through the VA. And it astonishes me that we could be a country that has the greatest military fighting force that we fund to the tune of trillions of dollars, but we don't seem to come up with the resources for our seniors that are in the VA. I've seen millions of seniors, I'm not exaggerating that number, we have millions of seniors in America that live effectively below the poverty line because their Social Security checks don't go far enough. And when I say we're not going to change anything, I'm not saying that. I'm actually saying that we are going to increase Social Security payments for our seniors. Why? Because this idea that Social Security is economically broken is wrong. Everybody in this room, unless you're making $500,000 a year, everybody in this room is paying a Social Security tax that is a regressive tax. In other words, people at the lower income scale are paying more in Social Security taxes than that person that makes $500,000, $1 million a year. What do I mean by that? Because Social Security taxes are capped. That after you get a little over $100,000 a year, you no longer pay it. That means that somebody who's making $1 million a year is paying an infinitesimally small percentage of their salary compared to somebody that makes $70,000 a year. The way we're going to fix Social Security is just by adjusting that cap for higher income people. That will not only make Social Security solvent for generations to come, but will give us the flexibility to say to those seniors who are living at or below the poverty line, we're going to bump up your Social Security check. Because every elder in our country deserves, in this nation, dignity and security. But I'm not stopping there. Because again, as a guy who has elders in my family, I have this amazing mother who terribly embarrasses me on the campaign trail. And she has a saying that says, behind every successful child is an astonished parent. and then she starts talking about that I wouldn't make my bed, and I want to be president of the United States. But my mom, and I bet you that there's a lot of folks that know this. My father had Parkinson's, that's what he died of. And she had to stay home and take care of. Does anybody here know a caregiver for someone with disabilities or someone who might be struggling with dementia? There's a lot of us here that know that. And then you know the pain that I know and watch the toll it takes on that caregiver. My mom had physical hurts because she had to lift my dad, physical injuries. Thank God my family had the resources, but it drained my mom's resources dramatically. And so I want to tell you right now, if I'm your president, we're going to end that isolation and those challenges very practical ways. Because by the way, my mom, if you're not there to take care of somebody, they often end up on public assistance. That costs us more money. That person's actually doing a service to society by doing what folks really want to do, which is often to age at home. And so I have a caregiver's agenda that says, number one, you should get more money back from your taxes. My earned income tax credit is going to give 150 million Americans a pay increase, cut poverty in a third, redefines work. If you're home working, taking care of someone with disabilities, or taking care of a spouse that's ill, you will qualify for that tax rate, and it'll put thousands of dollars back in your pocket as well. But more than that, we're going to allow people to age at home. Right now, some people here know this painfully, that in order to qualify for Medicaid to go into an institution, you have to drain through your entire life savings and go into poverty. What are we doing to families that work to save something? They want to have something meager to pass on to their kids, but we throw you into destitution in order to qualify for Medicaid. Enough of that. I'm going to raise the cap, the income caps, and I'm going to raise the earning caps for people to qualify for the benefits of Medicaid, and I'm going to get rid of that Medicaid and Medicare bias towards institutionalization and start doing things for people that want to age with grace at home as well. You want to know what a society is? There's a number of measures I always say. First, see how it treats children. We have a lot of work to do to get back to being the best nation on the planet Earth for kids, with prenatal care, doula care for low. I can go through the things on kids. You want to see what a society is all about? Look at their prisons and who they incarcerate. Other countries, it's political prisoners, or it's the media. This gentleman, I don't know where he went, but oh, here you are. They imprison media. But in our country, you know who we imprison? The drug addicted, the mentally ill, the low income, and just proportionally. I want us to be a society that you can judge us by looking at our kids, by looking at who we imprison, and then the biggest one is how do we treat our elders? And so my policies, I back up my values with policies on Social Security, and even there's seniors here on Medicare that know that Medicare has holes in it that doesn't work. We need to make Medicare better. If I'm one of these people that wants to provide a robust public option, I got to show that the Medicare, people say Medicare for all or expand Medicare. I said, well, let's improve Medicare and provide Medicare for those who want it. And then the last thing I just want to say,
And then say, don't worry, seniors.
and we should, I want to tell you right now, I don't want to tell you not to worry. I want to tell you, like my 100-year-old great aunt who lived in Iowa, to my mom right now, I want us to be a nation that brags to the world about how well we take care of our elders, our veterans, our children. Okay? And let me close with this, because I'm trying to leave a couple minutes to take as many selfies as we can before you drag me out of here. But I want to get back to this right now. The idea that I am going to be a president that tries to reactivate that empathy and that activist civic grace that we have, which means that I will not shirk from telling everybody that I'm hoping that this will be an election, if I'm your nominee, that we show ourselves to be different, that we show ourselves not to be called to the temptations of demeaning and degrading people if they vote differently than us, but we start talking about our higher values together as a country. Because you can't campaign wrong and think you're going to govern right. And if I'm the nominee, I hope we're all campaigning and getting involved. And so I want to leave you with a challenge I started saying back in April, because it was the anniversary of King's assassination. And I was telling people that if you go to where King's assassinated, they have words of scripture written there. And I'm not saying them because they have anything to do with religion. I'm one of these guys who would much rather hang out with a nice atheist than a mean Christian any day of the week. But I think the scripture is really important here. And because it's not about religion, it's about us. They actually chose the place where King is assassinated, to challenge all of us. And they wrote words there that come from the Bible and the Torah and the Quran. They were the words of Joseph's brothers right before they went to kill Joseph. You all know he had that coat of many colors, and they grabbed him to throw him into a pit to die. He didn't die in the pit, if you all know the story. He rose up out of that pit and led the nation through crisis. Now, we're in a pit right now. We are. There's no way to look at it. We say that we're the home of the brave, but veterans, the bravest amongst us, are disrepresented in terms of the homeless population. They're 10% of our homeless. We say we're a nation that believes in liberty and justice for all, but our criminal justice system treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. As my friend Brian Stevenson said, we are in a pit right now when people are not going into the greatest profession, teaching, because they can't make the math work to take a job that doesn't pay what the people rightfully earn. And so the challenge I leave you with, I hope that you'll support me. I really do. I hope that when you're making your decision of who to support, it's not just a head decision. It should be my policies, but I hope you make it with your gut. I hope you make it with your heart. And if you believe this is a moral moment, that this is a value-based moment in our country, I hope you'll join me and sign a commitment to caucus card, because we're building a movement here. There'll be my volunteers outside, and we really need them, folks to sign up. Because we're building, and don't think the polls. People are like, well, what about the polls? God bless America. The polls this far out in previous elections, every person we've sent to the presidency was not polling well right now. Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, and some guy who was very skinny, had great hair. What was his name again? Obama, that's it. All of them this far out. We know what matters in Iowa, which is teams on the ground, organizations on the ground. That's why I love it when your local press writes that we have one of the top 2 organizations on the ground, but we're building. And so if you believe in the values that I hold and that I'm talking about, the ideals as well as the ideas, please sign up. But the challenge I want to leave you with, though, no matter what you do in this moral moment, the challenge I want to leave you with is the one that was written where King was slain to future generations that would come. And what it says there, the words of Joseph's brothers, right before they killed him, it says this: "Behold, here cometh the dreamer. Let us slay him and see what becomes of the dream." My question to you is, this is a moment we all have to answer the question, what will happen to our dream, the dream of America? Will it become diminished on our watch? Will it become diluted on our watch? Will it become divided against itself? Well, I say not on our watch. That we in this generation can say that I too dream an America that is bold and courageous and has a defiant spirit of grace, of love, of patriotism. And in this moral moment, if we can dream like that and back it up with work and sacrifice and struggle, giving the best of who we are, the best measure of our devotion, if we can do that, we will not perish in the pit. America, we will rise. Thank you.